We started with the crickets because they really are the gateway bug, the easiest one for the consumer to wrap their head around. We now have a portfolio that's mixed. It's, pretty much 50-50 cricket and black soldier fly larva, which I think is fantastic, and, at some point in the future, I'm hoping to add mealworm as well. I think it's important to give the consumer some choices, and there's some benefits that are different between the different types of insect proteins. But, taking a step back, yep, we are the first, started this thing in 2016, got the first product to market in 2017, and they were all cricket treats.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like I say, I think like the crickets have really like not been. No, I don't think even anyone's even attempted it in the UK or in Europe particularly. It just seems to have gone between mealworms and black soldier fly. And when you think about it, crickets were probably the most mass-produced insect. So it's interesting that it's never really been a thing in the dog food market. But in the human food market, like, so we have a company over here called Yumbug who make cricket burgers, for example. So, and there was a range of barbecue flavored crickets and stuff went into our supermarkets, but it's never really hit the dog food market. So,
Well, it is more expensive, so it's more expensive to raise the crickets, and therefore, as a, ingredient, it is more expensive. But there is a real benefit to starting with something that the consumer can wrap their head around, especially when you think about it. Our end consumer are the dogs, and they can't buy it for themselves. So you've got to have something that appeals to their owner, and they're buying it as if it is their baby. It is, whenever I think about this category, I think about it as similar to baby. You basically look at your dog and say, does he like it? And he can't tell you. So you're basically going off of his reactions. So it has to sound good to the consumer, and then they have to see that the dog loves it.
yeah, and like, oh wait, that's always my thing. I think when people come into the industry, I think they don't see how many relationships you need to marry together to get to the final consumer, which is the dog. Like, because that we have to satisfy what the dog likes, so it's got to taste good. But then we also have to satisfy what's pleasing to the consumer. But then on top of that, like a lot of consumers, they want added benefits. They want to, because their dog is their baby. They want to give it the best they can give. It's very different to, let's say, when I walk into a store and I buy a drink for myself. I'm not thinking I want something that's healthy and I go in and buy like energy drinks and garbage like that, because I don't even you have a different thought process when it comes to yourself, or even, let's say, your adult kids, for example. Like, so it's a very different process, and so actually getting your head around that is actually quite tough.
That's so true. I mean, I eat healthy, but I slip up and every once in a while, and I'll have a craving for ice cream, and I indulge myself. But when I look at my dog, I am always thinking about his health, and I actually I don't slip up very often with him, even with like table scraps, because I know that they have too much salt, they have too much sugar. I really care about his health and making the right choices for him. Similar to when my daughter was a baby, I felt the same way, and I was really careful with her.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about insects as well is I think when you started, it was like pretty controversial, insect-based dog food. Whereas I think, whereas I think now we're actually a lot more people. There's a lot more brands. There's a lot more people doing it, and I think there's a lot more like acceptance, but also knowledge around it. But how was it in the beginning? Like, because it's got to be a hard sell.
It actually was really interesting to see people's reactions. We went to our first trade show in 2017, and when we said, "Yeah, these treats are made with cricket protein," people would be, "Yeah, yeah, whatever." And then all of a sudden they'd go, "Wait, what?" And you'd have to like back up and talk about why are we using this unusual protein, this novel protein. And so, yeah, a lot of education right from the get go. But the other side of it was that when we first started, it wasn't approved in the US. So we had to pay for the science. And that was a hard start. So the first 3+ years, we were doing the work to prove out that it was digestible for the dogs, it had utility, it was safe, that it was prebiotic. And those were all peer-reviewed studies that all went into a GRAS dossier, GRAS being generally recognized as safe, in order for us to go beyond treats and go into the food market. So we really took on a lot right from the get-go. I didn't realize quite, how hard it would be when I first started. I knew that, there was this thing called AHVMA and the FDA that we were gonna have to work with. And coming back to you saying, when you said you have to work with a lot of people, oh, yeah. It is tough at times. There's a lot of work that sits behind this, but it's so important because, the work that we did set the groundwork for this entire industry.